And speaking of foreign policy, the bill could have far-reaching and consequential implications for our policy in the Middle East. Thanks to Israel's artful diplomacy and incredible military, Iran's so-called axis of resistance lies in rubble in Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria, with Iran itself therefore exposed on its flanks for the first time in a generation. I would suggest at this highly promising yet highly sensitive moment that all our efforts should be focused on uniting our friends and our allies in the region to put an end, once and for all, to the threat of a nuclear-armed terror.
A senator just stood on the floor of the United States Senate and blocked justice for September 11th families. His reason had nothing to do with the families. Watch what he says instead.
Senator from Arkansas.
Reserving the right to object, I first would like to begin by joining my colleague from Texas and mourning the loss of the nearly 3,000 innocent Americans who died in the September 11th attacks. We must never, and we will never, forget them. I also want to extend my prayers to the families who lost loved ones that day and who bear the weight of their loss in their hearts every single day. However, I must object to this bill today because it hasn't yet received the careful consideration and deliberation that the subject warrants. First, and contrary to some suggestions, the bill would enact more than mere technical corrections to earlier legislation. Rather, the bill's provisions would significantly change how a highly technical area of U.S. law is interpreted. But the Judiciary Committee hasn't held a hearing or a vote on this bill. Not the fault of the senator from Texas, to be sure, but a fact nonetheless. I also question whether the Foreign Relations Committee should evaluate the bill as well, given its consequences for our foreign policy. Second, and speaking of foreign policy,
what just happened here is not procedural. A sitting U.S. senator used the geopolitical repositioning of Iran, a foreign adversary, as the justification for blocking a bill designed to give 9/11 families their day in court. He didn't say the bill was wrong. He said the timing was inconvenient for American foreign policy in the Middle East. That is a senator telling grieving families that their legal justice is a diplomatic liability. The Judiciary Committee never heard this bill. The Foreign Relations Committee never touched it. And now it dies in the final hours of a Congress, not from opposition, but from a single objection. Who does that serve? Drop your answer below, because Washington is not going to tell you.
the bill could have far-reaching and consequential implications for our policy in the Middle East. Thanks to Israel's artful diplomacy and incredible military, Iran's so-called axis of resistance lies in rubble in Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria, with Iran itself therefore exposed on its flanks for the first time in a generation. I would suggest at this highly promising yet highly sensitive moment that all our efforts should be focused on uniting our friends and our allies in the region to put an end, once and for all, to the threat of a nuclear-armed terrorist sponsoring Iran. Finally, this bill could have the unintended but unwelcome result of further delaying resolution and recovery for the 9/11 litigants' cases. The courts will likely need to reopen and relitigate past decisions based on the changed law, while a disproportionate amount of any future recovery could go primarily to insurance companies and lawyers instead of the families of the victims, if any recovery comes at all. For these reasons, I must object today, while suggesting that the new Congress revisit the matter with the hearings, regular order, and full consideration that the subject deserves. I yield the floor.
Objection is heard.
He never said the families were wrong. He never said Saudi Arabia is innocent. He never said the victims don't deserve justice. What he said was, not now. And in the Senate, not now almost always means not ever. What you just watched was a bill called JASTA, the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act, being blocked on the floor of the United States Senate in the final days of the 118th Congress. The bill was designed to allow 9/11 families to pursue legal accountability against those they believe financed the attacks. Senator Cotton of Arkansas stood up, offered his condolences, acknowledged the nearly 3,000 Americans who died, and then objected, calmly, methodically, with 3 numbered reasons. That structure matters. This was not a gut reaction. This was a prepared statement. That means someone knew this moment was coming. Someone drafted those talking points. And the argument that was chosen, above all others, was this: blocking justice for 9/11 families is necessary right now because Iran is weakened, Israel has gained ground, and this sensitive diplomatic moment must not be disrupted. Read that again slowly. The families of people who died on September 11th must continue waiting for their legal case to move forward, because the geopolitical window in the Middle East is open, and a bill about accountability might complicate it. But here is what nobody is asking. If Iran's weakened position is the reason to delay, what exactly is the plan for when Iran is strong again? The argument Senator Cotton made is not a reason to fix the bill. It is not a reason to improve the bill. It is a reason to shelve it, quietly, at the end of a session, with no hearing, no vote, no debate, and no news cycle to follow it. Think about what this means if you are sitting on the other side of this. You lost someone on September 11th. You have been inside this legal system for years. You have watched the courts, watched the committees, watched the bills get introduced and stall and reintroduce. And on December 17th, 2024, you watch a senator stand up in an empty chamber and tell you, with full preparation and full composure, that your case is a foreign policy problem. Senator Cotton raised 3 objections. The first was process. No Judiciary Committee hearing, no vote. That is a legitimate procedural argument. Bills should go through committee. But it sidesteps the fact that 9/11 litigation has been in the legal system for over 2 decades. Process was not the priority when the original AUMF passed in 72 hours after the attacks. The second objection was the one that will define this moment historically. He argued that with Iran exposed and the so-called axis of resistance, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Syrian forces, weakened or dismantled, this is a delicate and promising moment in the Middle East, and a legal accountability bill targeting terror financing could disrupt that. The third objection was about the families themselves, that reopening litigation could delay rather than accelerate resolution, and that insurance companies and lawyers might absorb the bulk of any eventual recovery. That is the one argument with genuine complexity. Litigation is slow. Settlement structures are often captured by intermediaries. The families may not be the primary financial beneficiaries even if the bill passes. That is worth a real debate. But here is the problem. You cannot use the families as your closing argument when you have already used foreign policy as your second one. Once you have told the families their justice is diplomatically inconvenient, you do not get to end with protecting them from lawyers. This is not a left or right issue in the way political media will frame it. There are Democrats who have raised similar procedural concerns about JASTA. There are Republicans who have championed it. The 9/11 families themselves are not a monolith. Some want the bill, some have concerns about unintended consequences. The legal terrain here is genuinely complicated. What is not complicated is this. A single senator, with a prepared 3-point statement, blocked a bill affecting September 11th families from even receiving a vote, in the final session of a Congress that will not return. The new Congress means the bill starts over. New introduction, new committee, new timeline, new obstacles. And the senator who objected suggested, politely, formally, that the new Congress revisit it with hearings and full consideration, which is exactly what supporters of the bill have been asking for since it was first introduced. If this is the kind of analysis you are not finding in your regular feed, you already know what to do. Because this channel exists for exactly these moments, when the C-SPAN footage says one thing and the headlines say nothing at all. The story of 9/11 accountability is not over. It has never been over. It has been rerouted, delayed, relitigated, and stalled across administrations of both parties, across decades, across the grief of families who are now in their 60s and 70s, watching it happen again. A bill blocked. A session ended. A new Congress beginning with no guarantee this surfaces again before the diplomatic window Senator Cotton described either closes or is used to justify the next delay. The final question is not whether this bill was perfect. It probably was not. The final question is whether the families of nearly 3,000 Americans deserve a vote. Not a passage, not a guarantee, just a vote. That question did not get answered on December 17th, 2024. It got objected to. And the objection is heard. If you watch this far, subscribe, share this with someone who needs to see it, and leave your take in the comments, because this story is not finished.